Hi everyone, welcome to JIVINITI, where we connect the dots between public and planetary health. And on this episode of our monthly IG Live series, I am so excited to welcome the passionate, adventurous, plant-powered mountaineer Kuntal Joisher, who has not only climbed Mount Everest once, but twice. So help me in welcoming Kuntal, and I'll add him. Hi,
Hey, how's it
Kuntal.
going?
Hi, I'm doing so well. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, I can, and you can hear me okay?
All good here.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Divinity Connecting the Dots. And I want to jump right in. So, can you tell everyone a little bit about your plant-powered story? What inspired you to go vegan?
What inspired me to go vegan? I'm going to keep it short, but back in 2002, look, sorry, I'm going to go backtrack a little bit more.
Yeah,
I grew up in a vegetarian family, so the concept or the mindset of vegetarianism was always there in terms of compassion towards animals. So that's how I kind of grew up. That's how my parents kind of brought me up, where they said, look, animals are just like us. Like I live in Mumbai and we are surrounded by cows everywhere, on the roads everywhere. And so when a cow is passing by my place, my parents were always like, hey, look, this is a cow that has a kid. They have a family. They are social animals like us. They feel pain, all of those things, right? So I kind of always identified with that. And yes, that was great. I'm a vegetarian. I felt like I, I am going to be honest here. I actually felt very superior. I also felt elitist to certain extent. I'm like, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. That's the kind of mindset I also had. And then when I went to the US and I started living independently, I had a couple of roommates who were slightly more inclined towards compassion towards animals.
right.
And they started questioning a lot of choices I was making on a day-to-day basis, like maybe buying a leather jacket or buying a leather belt or eating a chocolate with eggs or eating an ice cream with eggs. And I would always, like, whenever they would question me, I would be very defensive. I would always ask them, why are you on my case? What's the problem? This is just a stuff that I go and buy from a supermarket, it's out there, packaged nicely. So I'm like, no problem with this. Then they started kind of exposing me to a lot of horrors in the dairy, the leather, and the egg industry. And it was quite shocking to me. To be very frank, I think the biggest connection I made is that no animal is voluntarily going to come to you and say, hey, take my skin and make it into leather. Hey, take my milk and I'm not going to give it to my young one.
Right.
There's simply no consent involved when animals are used for food, for recreation, for clothing. There's simply no consent involved, and it is inhumane, it is unethical. And I connected all those dots.
Mm.
And once I connected the dots that there's no difference between meat and milk, and that there's no difference between meat and like cheese or meat and leather belt or meat or that feather jacket I was wearing or meat or anything that came from an animal. I think once I kind of made that connection, I had to take a stand.
Right.
And either I had to say, okay, I'm going to live my life filled with apathy, or the fake compassion that, I think I have, and my fake superiorism or my fake elitism that I have, or I can truly take a stand for the animals. I can truly empathize with the animals. I can truly actually make a difference. And that difference starts from what is on my plate and what is on my body. And I control both of those things. And I did some research. This was, I think, December of 2002. And I realized that there's this movement called veganism, and that there are a whole bunch of vegans in Los Angeles where I was living back then. And I thought, I just need to go vegan. This this is the thing I need to do, because this really, really will resolve the dilemma that I have between my compassionate thoughts, but my actions that still contribute to animal cruelty. And that this is the only resolution and the only way forward. And that is how my plant powered journey started. And I know I said that I'm going to keep it short, but I just went on a long one. But this is how I think it all started with connecting the dots, to be very frank.
Absolutely. And I think you shared a really powerful distinction between vegetarianism and veganism, and creating the understanding and conscious choice in not necessarily seeing direct cruelty in those packages, and you know, not really knowing the stories and the experiences that animals go through from shelf to plate or farm to plate. And so thank you for sharing your plant-powered story. And I'm really curious to know, in your experience and passion for mountaineering, how has veganism and the plant-powered movement supported your health and inspired you to become a mountaineer?
So I do want to first, give a clarification. The way I thought about humans or non-vegetarians or non-vegan humans before I turned vegan was this, feeling that I am superior than them. But I think once I actually connected the dots with animals, or just connected the dots with cruelty, I think there was not just empathy for animals, but there was also empathy for everyone involved. I think everyone. And so I no longer think of myself as superior, no longer think of myself as elitist. I think a lot of my ego that I had, or this, thing that, hey, I am superior, I think that just got crushed when I connected the dots. And it's now more about, hey, if you want to go vegan, I'm here to support you. It is your personal journey. That's pretty much, how I kind of see things. In terms of my Everest journey, and in terms of how that kind of connects to veganism, I still remember 2010, I found my biggest dream of my life, to be very frank. Or I think the biggest dream, at least up till this point of my life. I don't know what other dreams I'm going to have. But back then I decided Everest was like the dream of my life. And I remember announcing that I'm going to climb Everest as a vegan. And then quickly there was a lot of pushback. This is back in 2010 when veganism was not still as mainstream as is it today. And I remember writing to agencies and telling them, hey, can you support my journey? Can you give me vegan food? And they were like, but what is vegan? And I literally had to explain them that what vegan meant. I had to write it down saying, hey, vegan means no dairy, no milk, no cheese, no. They didn't even understand the difference between milk and milk powder.
Wow.
And I'm like,
yeah.
This is ridiculous. It's the same thing. One is powder, one is real milk. So I had to do all those things, but there was quickly a lot of pushback, and the pushback was mostly centered around, hey, you need to eat meat. Hey, you need to eat dairy, and hey, you need to eat eggs. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to build stamina to train for Mount Everest. Or for example, how are you going to stay warm on Mount Everest? And I was like, look, any sensible person knows that meat is mainly consumed for protein, or dairy is mainly consumed for calcium, or for example, eggs are mainly consumed for protein and micronutrition. And for anyone who has studied the plant-based world, you know that plant-based world has ample of nutrition and ample of stuff to take care of your protein needs, to take care of all your nutrition needs. So I kind of was a little taken aback when there was this pushback. But I said, you know what, I'm going to do it as a vegan or not do it at all. And I'm going to just try out by doing one small peak. And small peak, of course, is relative. It was a 20,000 feet peak, which is already the tallest mountain in Northern America.
Wow.
So, but when you come to Himalaya, it's like really, really small in comparison to everything else. But I climbed that mountain as a vegan.
Wow.
And all my gear on that climb was vegan. I was vegan.
Nice.
Everything was vegan on that climb from my perspective. And I was like, what is all this pushback about? Here is a guy who is only trained for less than 6 months, is standing on top of a 6,000 meter peak, and is just doing fine.
And
I
was this,
don't think this is going to be a challenge.
yeah, was this your first climb? Your first,
This
yeah,
was my first climb in
wow.
July 2011.
Okay.
So yeah, this was my first climb back then. And yeah, look, if I have to make a list of 100 challenges
Hmm.
that I faced on my Everest journey, veganism would not even be the 101st challenge on that list. So
I can.
it was a non-issue, to be very frank.
Mm. Right. Yeah. So when you began this journey and you were experiencing pushback and people were, probably telling you this is impossible, can't be done, how how did you get around that? Because I know that I know your story around not only climbing Everest once, but twice, because the second time you wanted to do it in completely vegan gear. So could you share a little bit about your intention and the reason why it was so important for you to go back the second time, and maybe share a little bit about Save the Duck as well?
Right. So I summited Everest for the first time in May 2016. And when I stood on the top of Everest, yes, I had achieved the biggest dream of my life.
Hmm.
But as I came back home and I reflected back upon the climb, I quickly realized that no, I did not achieve the biggest dream of my life. Because the biggest dream of my life was to climb Everest as a vegan. But when I was standing on top of Everest, I was wearing a one-piece suit, one of the most critical piece of equipment that a climber wears,
Right.
that was made from feathers of a slaughtered geese. If many birds were slaughtered so that their feathers could be taken and a jacket could be created for me, then how can I call myself a vegan? Yes, I was a vegan at sea level. Yes, I was a dietary vegan, but veganism is not a dietary choice. There's internet is filled with dietary wars around, labeling vegans as dietary choice, but it has nothing to do with a dietary choice. And it has everything to do with ethics. It has everything to do with animal rights. It has everything to do with animal liberation. It has everything to do with animals. They are the centerpiece of the whole movement. How can we call it a dietary choice? It's not a dietary choice. So when I came back, I realized that I a dead animal had to die for me to achieve my dreams, and that is something I could not live with. And like I was making it such a big thing because I wanted the exposure. I wanted to go and talk about veganism. I wanted to talk about plant-based diet. I wanted to be that brand ambassador for the movement. And
Hmm.
yet I was wearing a dead animal on my body. That just did I it kind of took away my sleep. It took
Hmm.
away a lot of peace from my life, and I had to do something about it. And
Yes.
that something was I had to go back and climb Everest again, but this
Mm.
time around do it without wearing that dead animal on my body and show everyone that it can be done. And the problem was that one piece equipment, that one piece suit. And I had since 2012, I had been writing every single year to all these gear companies across the world. Hey, can you build me one suit? Hey, can you build me one suit? And everyone, like, either the mails would go in black hole. If they ever responded, it was, hey, you're mad. This is not possible. Or hey, this is not financially viable. So a lot of, kind of rejections from so many people. And to a certain extent, I just gave up. It was a cop out. I went in 2016, climbed the mountain, thinking maybe I can still prove that plant-based diet works, at least from my perspective.
Hmm.
And I came back home, tried harder. Luckily, I reached out to Save the Duck. I think one of my friends said, "Hey, why don't you write to Save the Duck? They make
Right.
this amazing, synthetic insulation." So I'm like, okay, let's write.
Hmm.
What will happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? They will say no. Heck, everyone has said no to me anyway across the world. So one more no is not going to make a difference to me. So I wrote to them on Facebook, climb Everest. And the chief marketing officer wrote back to me saying, I want to get on a phone call with you. And I'm like, this seems unreal.
Mm.
So I got on a phone call with her,
That's
and
all.
she's like, we are going to build the jacket for you. I am like,
Wow.
man, this is ridiculous. And 8 months later, in April of 2018, I'm literally holding the first ever synthetic jacket of the world. And I'm like, am I dreaming? Is this all even happening for real?
Right.
And then I went and I climbed a mountain called Lhotse, which is the fourth tallest mountain in the world, wearing this jacket, kind of using myself as a guinea pig. It's like such ironic that I'm using a guinea pig,
Yeah.
analogy because they're tested all. So I've used myself as one and went on the mountain, tested it. The gear worked perfectly fine. I
That's
was cozy. I was warm at 28,000 feet. And at that point, I knew that climbing Everest was a matter of when, not a matter of how.
wow.
And that I did the next year. On May 23rd, I stood on top of Everest,
Wow.
2019, and 100% vegan from a gear perspective,
Ooh.
from a food perspective. Look, I'm not going to say that I don't chase perfection. I don't chase purism. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, did I go to the depth of levels of whether the tent I was living in, whether the glue that was used to make the tent, was it vegan? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I did the best I could. I did whatever was possible from my perspective to take care that everything I was wearing, everything I was consuming was vegan. Every person on my team was well taken care of. They were well compensated for. They were taken care of in terms of insurance. So it's not just humans or animals, everything. I was looking at it from all angles possible
Mm-hmm.
that I could, do the best justice to my client.
Wow.
And I did what the best I could. It's about, I think at the end of the day, it's how much cruelty can we minimize, and
Exactly.
from a mentality or a mindset perspective, did I do the best I did? I put
Right.
in the 100% of effort that I could have, and I thought I did. So I was
Absolutely.
pretty satisfied.
Wow. I have chills. Just the fact when you were saying that you were standing on May 23rd at the top of Mount Everest, 100% vegan. I mean, it's an incredibly inspiring story, Kuntal. So, and so, could you tell us a little bit more? What is the synthetic material? I'm curious. It's a was it in? It's a specific jacket invented um, for your journey, but is it now available? Do other people invest and use the material? How widely known is it?
So Save the Duck as a brand is pretty
Mm.
widely known across the world, but primarily for city wear or primarily for bridging the gap between the fashion world and the cold wear. Because
Right.
sometimes when you buy jackets for cold weather climates, the jackets are very boring. They just have a
Right.
couple of colors and they just look very bland. Most people don't like them. So kind of Save the Duck thought, hey, we need to handle this problem differently. We need to bring in fashion to this world, but yet
Mm.
need to keep the function together while
Yeah.
being respectful towards animals. So that is the kind of vision Save the Duck had, and that is still the vision that they are kind of focusing on. So
Right.
building jacket for me, it's not commercially available. The
Mm.
material that was used is a proprietary material called Plume Tech. They call it Plume Tech, and the
Damn.
insulation itself is made from the outer material of the jacket was made from recycled plastic bottles.
Mm.
So that was one piece, and the internal insulation was made from, unfortunately, virgin plastic. Uh, but we are trying to work on a next version of this jacket, which is going to be entirely 100% top to bottom recycled
Nice.
materials only. So, and my hope is that once this one jacket is built, that I never buy another jacket in my life again, because I don't like buying more things, and I don't like, adding to this. I mean, I just don't like having many things. So once I have this piece of jacket, which we think will be like really cool piece of technology, I think that's that. I am never going to buy another jacket in my life, at least from this perspective.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's incredible. It sounds like it's making, well, first it's focusing on minimizing cruelty, not only for animals, but also for the planet. And it's that's an incredible piece of technology. So thanks for sharing that. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about health and busting myths around being plant powered and being an athlete. In your experience, because I know that you also run a coaching program, health coaching program, is that correct? And so, from your journey of being a mountaineer to now in your coaching program, what kind of myths have been busted as a plant powered athlete?
Right. So I think from a vegan perspective, from a plant-based diet perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the primary myths tends to be centered around protein,
Mm-hmm.
because that tends to be like really like the sticking point, like recently I was having a conversation with one of my cousins, like a
Mhm.
very young cousin who ended up switching to eating eggs because their gymnastics coach said, hey, you need to eat eggs
Right.
if you really, really need to excel at gymnastics. And this is the situation all across India. If you go to a gym, if you go to a coaching program, where they think that if you are a vegetarian or if you are a vegan, then you simply don't have enough protein, or you are going to lack protein, or the protein sources are not complete.
Mhm.
But look, this is far, far, far from truth. Okay. And as newer and newer and newer research emerges in the last few years, like recently, there was an amazing study done at one of the premier universities in Canada by one of the premier protein researchers of the world, where he compared directly an omnivorous group of people who were training to a vegan group of people who were training. And these were vegans for many, many years. Okay, so it's not like they're new vegans or they're just going vegan for the heck of the study or
Right.
something like that. And these people trained for 12 weeks. They all trained under supervision. They all ate under supervision. They all ate equal amounts of protein. One group ate omnivorous plus plant-based sources of protein, and one group just ate plant-based sources of protein.
Right.
But they ate equal protein, they eat equal food, they trained in the similar fashion. And at the end of 12 weeks, they found that both the groups had exactly the same amount of muscle mass that was gained.
Mm-hmm.
They did a DEXA scan, they did biopsies, they did caliper measures, they did wide variety of measures, and they
Mm-hmm.
found that both groups had equal amount of mass muscle gain as possible. And yes, now you may come back to me and point that this is just one study. But look, the vegan movement has only gone mainstream in the last 4 or 5 years. And as more and more companies start coming up with vegan products and more money gets into the research areas, especially at the university level, we are going to see tons and tons of tons and tons of real science research come out that's going to anyways back what we in the vegan world have known since decades now, that there's enough protein in the plant-based world.
Mm-hmm.
That this is just a myth that we just need to now, put this myth in like, a suitcase and just throw this away. Like it can't be. I can't keep hearing this that, like where am I getting my protein from? I
Exactly.
climbed Mount Everest twice. I must have gotten my protein from somewhere. Otherwise, I would be falling off my feet or something.
Yeah.
That said, I do think that as vegans,
Mm-hmm.
we are role models of this movement, and we do need to pay a little bit more attention to our diets, and we do need to be a little smart about the choices we are making on our plate. And instead of just making blanket statements such as, "Hey, just eat a diverse diet and you will get your protein."
Right.
I think we need to do a little bit better than that. I think we need to kind of show that, hey, look, we are getting enough protein and that we are doing cool things out there. So, no harm in doing that from our side. Because I have also seen that because I'm a vegan coach, a lot of vegans reach out to me. And when I do see a lot of their diets, they do tend to be very, very low on protein, even lower than the RDA requirements. And RDA is already very low. So, I do see that quite often. So it is something that I have been working a lot, where I just want to, kind of, yes, eat a diverse diet. Yes, eat a
Yes.
well-balanced diet. But don't forget that there are 3 macronutrients and
Yes.
one of them is protein. So pay a
It's,
little bit more attention. And it's not that it's lacking in the diet itself.
mm-hmm.
It's just that if you make a smart choice, it will not be lacking anymore.
Right. Can you give everyone a couple examples of some nutrient-rich, protein-rich, plant-based foods?
Right. So, for example, the way I consume my protein, there are multiple sources of protein. One I would call is a lean source of protein.
Mm-hmm.
And then one is a source of protein which may not be lean, which may have a lot of carbs and a lot of fats. But let's say if we are just going to stick to lean source of protein, something like a tofu or something like
Yeah.
tempeh.
Mm-hmm.
So tofu and tempeh are amazing sources of protein. Then we have wheat gluten, which is also amazing source of protein. And then if you go into different, like if you go into slightly less lean sources of protein, you have everything from lentils to seeds to nuts,
Exactly.
wide range of stuff. So again, if you can mix and match, if you have a plate where you have a whole grain, you have a lentil, You have fruits, you have vegetables, and you have a tofu. Now you have suddenly a plate which is not only micronutrition packed, macronutrition packed, but is also, and everything is not just about protein, right?
Right.
You have your entire body to take care of. You have your heart to take care of. You have your kidneys, you have your liver, you have all these amazing organs that you need to take care of, and they need other nutrition as well. So I think sometimes I feel we have this world which is either proteinoholic, or then we have this other side which is just proteinophobic. And there's no middle ground here. And I think middle ground is a solution where have a good balanced plate, a plate which is filled with whole foods. And maybe from time to time, you can include some fun foods that if you really like.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just eat, whole nutritious foods most of the times, and
Absolutely.
you'll be taken care of.
Absolutely. So we've connected the dots between animals, our health, and so I'd like to touch a little bit upon environmental health as well. There's an article that was recently published by Nature describing that Mount Everest has lost, I believe it's 2,000 years worth of ice in 25 years. Absolutely shocking. And I was reading as well that dead bodies have even emerged over the past couple decades of people that have attempted to climb Mount Everest and failed. And so it's very clear, the science is clear that we're in a climate crisis. And as someone who has summited and really is connected to mountains, can you describe a little bit about the connections between diet, environmental health, and how do you feel, first of all, hearing about news like this of the mountains that are, the ice that's melting on Mount Everest?
So, first of all, the ice that melted on Mount Everest melted at 26,000 feet. So, sure, that is okay. But there's a much bigger problem in the Himalaya where there's glaciers that are actually the sources of water for significantly downstream villages and civilizations. Right. Those are melting, those are creating massive dams, those are breaking, they are killing people. There's a havoc that is happening at much lower altitudes. I don't, who cares about what's happening at 26,000 feet? Sure, it's a problem. Sure, it's, like devastating to hear that Mount Everest at 26,000 feet is losing all this ice. So imagine what must be happening at lower altitudes if 26,000 feet, which is like, almost like near space.
Right.
Is, losing all this, ice. In minus 30, minus 40 degrees Celsius, it's losing all this ice. Imagine what's happening at lower altitudes. It is far more devastating. And that's kind of I have been going to the Everest base camp for last 10 years. Every single passing year that I've gone there, the entire Khumbu Glacier, the glacier that starts at Everest, is receding and going in and in and in.
Wow.
I think in 10 years, probably the base camp will, God knows where it will start, inside the mountain probably. I don't even know what's going on from, this perspective. So I think there's a far bigger crisis that people are not looking at, where they are looking at, 26,000 feet on Everest. Now, as you said, what can we do? And sometimes I feel that you can do simple things, like people, are kind of, trying to say, hey, let's, not drink, water with straws. I'm like, yeah, sure, you want to do that, great. But I think there's a much bigger tangible change that you can make that starts from your plate. If you can stop eating animals, that will have a massive impact on how you can, kind of make a tangible change towards reversing climate crisis.
Yes.
And to give a sense of it, the way our animals are grown. Now, I'm going to kind of use the term grown. They're not grown, but they are lives, they are sentient beings, they are emotional beings. So, but for a moment, let's say, if I'm going to look at animal as a livestock industry where animals are grown, just to create a single piece of steak, probably, which is going to have 20 grams of protein and maybe 100 or 150 calories, the amount of resources that are required from the start to end is massive. The amount of greenhouse gas emissions, the amount of biodiversity loss, the amount of land use, water use, it is incredibly massive. The people always come back to me and say, you are eating soybeans and you are eating all this tofu. I'm like, the amount of soybeans consumed by humans is less than 2 to 3%.
Right.
98% of soybeans grown on this planet is fed to the beef that is coming on your table or the chicken that is coming on your table. Mm-hmm. If you're so worried about the planet and the soybeans, stop eating animals first. Just start eating the soybeans directly. They're far more nutritious source of protein and micronutrients. Exactly. If you're really worried about all these things. I do think by just switching to eating plants instead of animals, we can look, each one of us is trying to look how can we make an impact. Okay, I can stop using a car, or I can stop taking flights. Yeah, those are great changes. How many people are doing that? Not many are able to do. And how many flights am I taking in a year? Maybe right. One. Sometimes I don't even take any flights in a year. How many times I go in a car? I don't even own a car. I actually use a public transportation all the time. Mm-hmm. So for me, what's the change I can make? And that change is go plant-based. Start eating more plants and start eating more local plants, right? So it's not like you should be eating an avocado that is grown in Mexico, or maybe an avocado grown in Mexico and packaged in Thailand and then coming to India on my plate. No, just eat, local plant-based foods. And that is, the number one thing that you can do to make a real, genuine impact on reversing climate crisis, in my opinion, at least. Because look, there are many things we can do, but this is like a no-brainer. Good for the planet, good for the animals, good for your health. It's like a win-win for everyone. Why would you not want to do it? That's how I think, kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally align with that. But a lot of the media and research that's shared talks a lot about the climate crisis as something that is driven by transportation, or, greenhouse gas emissions are linked a lot to like aviation or cars, like you mentioned. And I think it's really important to also steer the conversation to the fact that the amount of greenhouse gas emission from transportation is minimal compared to from animal agriculture. And you're absolutely right. It's like, instead of eating, the soybean or the wheat that that is produced for the animals, eat directly from the source, eat locally. And so we're running a little bit out of time, so I'd like to just take a quick moment to plug in Himalayan Vegan Festival as well, which I know that you're a part of. And so if you could just quickly share a little bit about what the festival is, why should people attend, and what is your role in it?
Right. So, we just spoke about the climate crisis, and we spoke about how it's directly impacting the Himalaya. So, Himalayan Vegan Festival is one of the first plant-based festivals in the Himalaya. It's happening in Nepal and it's happening in Bhutan. Two of the, really, really sensitive countries, I would say, from a biodiversity, and a Himalayan perspective. So we are here. We are going to raise awareness about veganism. There's speakers coming from all across the planet, going to be talking about nutrition, going to be talking about ethics, going to be talking about environment, going to be talking about health, going to be talking about feminism, everything and anything that is connected to animal rights and animals. And there's going to be some amazing food. There's going to be some amazing activities, and it's a 6-day festival. So it's also a chance to come to the Himalaya, visit the Himalaya, kind of connect with the people here, understand a lot about what, try out the delicacies from Bhutan and Nepal, all veganized here.
Absolutely.
So I do think it's an amazing festival to attend. It's going to be in September. So it's September 15th through September 21st.
Right.
If anyone wants to get more information, they can always reach out to me in person. They can also directly go on the website and find details about the speaker information and how to get passes and how to visit the festival, how to come to the festival. But I am super excited because I love the Himalaya. It's my second home. And while I'm part of the organizing committee, I think it is the amazing folks both on ground in Nepal and Bhutan doing a kick-ass job at putting together this festival, and just looking forward to getting there and hanging out with all the fellow vegans, but hanging out with all the fellow non-vegans as well, vegan curious folks as well, sharing my story, sharing my journey with them, helping them introduce to the world of veganism, and hopefully one person at a time, one meal at a time, one climb at a time, make this world vegan. I think that's what we all want to do at that festival.
Absolutely. Divinity is going to be there. I know you're going to be there. And it sounds like an incredible opportunity, especially because it's grassroots, locally driven, and it's open to everyone.
Yes.
It's really an invitation for everyone to join the movement. So thank you so much, Kuntal, for your time and for sharing your story and for helping us connect the dots between public and planetary health.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Really appreciate that. And I had a great time sharing my story. So, yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Kuntal. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
take care. Bye-bye.